When I started doing stuff on the internet in the early days, it was like the Wild West. The only limit was your imagination, and that's how we ended up with so many great things empowering so many people. The benefits to the internet for communication and education are absolutely huge, and to that end, it's probably one of the best things that's ever happened to humanity. But back then, you kind of had to know a little bit about how things worked. You needed to know how to connect a modem, how to use TCP WinSock, or how to install Linux. But anyone could be an ISP. Anyone could connect from anywhere. It was supposed to be a future where everyone hosted their own website and everyone controlled their own data. Then it all changed. More people connected who didn't understand how the system worked. They needed to be able to just be online without knowing what was involved. People started connecting through their phones because phones were more prevalent than computers. People wanted faster connections, and the infrastructure to enable that cost money to build. All of this moved control over accessing the internet from the general public to corporations. You used to be able to just use a different ISP for your connection, but now you're probably in a 3-year contract with a tyrant, and even if you wanted to switch, they're the only provider with a connection to your building or to your neighborhood. So here we are, 2.5 decades later. We have a generation who thinks that the internet is something that lives in their phone. Control over accessing the internet is concentrated in a handful of corporations. Control over finding data on the internet is concentrated in one corporation above all others. People don't know what to do with themselves if they can't access Facebook or Twitter. Everyone hates the company they get their internet from because it costs too much, the service sucks, or the company abuses the relationship for personal gain. You know what I'm talking about, right? Does it piss you off? Do you hate that you can't do anything about it? I'm going to show you an easy thing that you can do today to take back some of the control that they've stolen from you and to help protect yourself from their abuse. Recently, my ISP here in Chile started blocking DNS and ICMP traffic. At first, I thought it was a problem on my end, but after a day of troubleshooting, I could demonstrate that any computer connected to the internet could only resolve DNS from their name servers. No root servers, no public DNS providers, no ping, no traceroute. I asked myself, why would they do this? Well, what are ping and traceroute most often used for? Troubleshooting. What do they show? They show the path and the latency between my computer and a destination somewhere else. If I can't use ping or traceroute, what can't I do? Troubleshooting. If my ISP sells me a plan with a guaranteed level of service, but I can never track their performance to determine if they're honoring the guarantee, I can never justify a complaint. I can call them and report issues, but the people on the other end of the phone are non-technical, sitting off in some call center reading from a script. It's a recipe for failure because they're asking me to reboot things, swap power cables, buy a new computer, stand on one foot, or just try again later. Any provider who funnels your DNS traffic to their servers is doing it so that they can monitor and control it. There's no other reason to do it. We saw this first with VeriSign and then with OpenDNS hijacking DNS requests from mistyped URLs and directing them to web pages covered in advertisements. Then Verizon did it. Then others saw that no one could stop them, and so they started doing it anyway. It's free money. My ISP knows my IP address so they can see every DNS request that comes from it. This allows them to build a model of what I'm interested in, and they can sell that data to other companies in the advertising space who then use it for targeted advertising. They can do it because I'm part of a captive audience, the same way that food at a movie theater or at an airport costs 4 times as much as it should. They can abuse the relationship because, well, there's nothing I can do about it. Any internet service provider can monitor its customers, but they're not supposed to. That's part of the trust of the relationship. I'm paying for access to the internet. I should not also have to defend myself against the company that I'm paying. It's as though the company responsible for paving the road from my house to the nearby town also employs thugs who try to rob me every time I drive down it. That's the world. But you are still an individual. You still have choice, and you can still do things to keep you and your family safe. You can use technology to live a better life. You can use technology to protect you from corporate greed by making it harder for them to identify you as an individual in an ocean of noise. This is why we've seen so much of the internet move from unencrypted traffic to encrypted traffic. But DNS is at the core of all that communication, and DNS is still unencrypted. It's like the metadata on a phone call or a text message. Even if the message is encrypted, someone can still see who is communicating with whom, how often, and for how long. They can use that to build a database of relationships between people that is so valuable, the content of the communication is almost irrelevant. The details of the relationship are easy enough to infer. So even if you use a DNS provider outside of your ISP's network, anyone with access to the communication path can still intercept and track those requests. The best way right now to encrypt DNS traffic is to use DNS-Over-HTTPS, or DOH, first proposed to the IETF by Mozilla in 2018. This makes a request to an HTTPS endpoint, and from there, a special server forwards it to a DNS server and then replies with the answer. It's like a VPN for DNS requests, and because it looks like normal web traffic, it'll pass through most filters. ISPs theoretically could still block the destination if it's a publicly known server like Google or Cloudflare, but I'm going to show you today how to run your own DOH proxy. What we want is a solution that frees us from being dependent on a single provider for DNS information and that we can run on our own infrastructure. So the other day, I saw an article about DOHproxy.com. It's a site that'll load balance DOH requests across multiple providers. In addition to providing it as a service, that site gives instructions for how to run your own proxy on a VPS using Nginx and Let's Encrypt. When I read it, I was like, I already use Nginx and Let's Encrypt in my Kubernetes clusters. Can we adapt this to run in Kubernetes? Sure enough, we can. Now, setting this up is remarkably easy. First, go to this gist, which I'll also link to in the description, and create a config map from the two files there. The first is the configuration for the DOH proxy, and the second is just running a status server on port 8080 for Kubernetes to use as a health check. The first config map is easy. It creates 4 local listeners starting on port 8001. Each of these forwards to a different external DOH provider. These are assembled into a single upstream alias, and that alias is used to answer queries for the DNS query endpoint on this server. There's also a section for configuring a static page for requests to /, but really, honestly, I don't care about that right now. If you want to add additional providers, or if you want to change this configuration, you just change the config map and then redeploy the workload. Config maps update automatically, but Nginx isn't configured to automatically reload on a config change. It's easy enough to just redeploy the workload or do an in-place upgrade to launch a new pod. I recommend that you do it that way instead of killing the pod because you want to have something answering the DOH requests all the time. Once the config maps are built, we just launch a default Nginx pod running the Alpine version of this package. I added an HTTP path check on 8080, and then I mount the config map as a volume on etc nginxconf.d. Anything in this directory that ends in .conf is automatically loaded into the Nginx config. This shouldn't use much in the way of resources, so I'll add some basic limits. We can use this later to configure horizontal pod auto-scaling in case we want to automatically scale up under load. You'll need that if you're running this as a public service. Probably. Maybe. Depends. But next we'll add an ingress for ns.channel.monoc.us and secure that with a certificate from Let's Encrypt. This is just normal Kubernetes, so I'm just going to zip through it. We can test it using the DOH client script that I'll show you later. This makes a DOH request to our proxy and it forwards the request and then returns the answer. Running our own DOH proxy isn't enough. DOH support isn't available in every operating system or on every edge router, and it certainly isn't available on any router that you get from your ISP. So how do we get this back to the desktop? I mean, I can activate support for DOH in Firefox, but even that's not enough. I want every request that leaves my computer to be protected. There's a very cool new service called NextDNS that has native apps for computers and mobile devices. It's currently free in beta, and it includes ad blocking lists as part of the available features. This is an excellent solution, and when I'm out of the house, I activate it on my phone and on my laptop. When I'm in my house, I run a Pi-hole that handles all DNS traffic and forwards via DOH to my upstream proxy. But what about you? What if you don't have a Raspberry Pi sitting around the house, or what if you don't want to use a single service provider like NextDNS? I mean, after all, this whole video is about using a proxy to distribute the requests among multiple providers. At an IETF hackathon in January of 2008, some enterprising people created a set of Python scripts to provide DNS-over-HTTPS functionality in both client and server forms. One of those is a stub that acts as a DNS server but forwards those requests to a DOH server for processing. Although written for Python 3, these scripts don't currently run with Python 3.7. I've opened an issue with the maintainer of the AIOH2 repository, but you don't have to wait for them to fix it. Yesterday, I created a Docker container called DOH Tools that you can use. I'll put a link to it in the description below. You've already seen me use it as DOH client, which is just an alias to run the container. So this means that we can run a stub server in Docker on our local machine and then point our machine's DNS to localhost. This will forward DNS requests to our proxy out on the internet, where they'll be load balanced across multiple DOH providers to mix our requests up with the noise of the rest of the internet. When launching the container, we just tell Docker to forward UDP port 53 to the container, and then we also tell the container to listen on 0.0.0.0, which means every IPv4 address. We also tell it where to forward requests to, and once it's running, we can run queries against it. So you can see the output in the logs, which includes an X resolved by header that our proxy adds, telling us where it sent the request. Use this for troubleshooting if you start getting 404s or if you see issues with a certain upstream provider. This, as good as it is only part of the solution. See, a big part of DNS is caching responses, and DOH doesn't include any provision for doing that. Like I said earlier, I run a Pi-hole in the house, and that acts as my caching server. But for what I've shown you today, there's no caching layer. In the next video, I'll show you how to combine these DOH tools with standard DNS solutions to give you the best of local caching and secure forwarding. I want you to go out and deploy a DOH solution and start using it today. If you don't have a Kubernetes cluster to do it in, then you can do it on your local machine with Kubernetes and Docker, or you can use K3s or Minikube or Kind or anything. You can build it with K3s on a Raspberry Pi. If you can't do that, then at least sign up for NextDNS and run their apps on your devices to secure your DNS traffic. Vote with your feet. Help the people around you who don't understand technology vote with their feet too. Run a proxy for your friends and family. Install ad blockers in their networks. Give them a Pi-hole for Christmas. It's not what it sounds like. If this stuff makes you mad, there's a lot that you can do. So start doing it today. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, you can click the subscribe button now and fix that. If you click the little bell icon, you'll get notified when I release a new video. I put out new videos every week, and all of them are about things that you can do to control the technology in your life instead of letting others control it for you. If this video was helpful, please click the thumbs up to let me know and share it with your friends and colleagues. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.